Hello, my name is Tarkas Penadin, and I will start with the first issue, which concerns letter of credit compliance. The key question here is whether the bank is released from its obligation to honor the payment due to discrepancies in the documents. In this case, there were three major discrepancies, which were an incorrect certificate of conformity issued by an unauthorized agency, partial insurance coverage of 90% instead of the full 100%, and late document presentation. Under Article 14 of UCP 600, strict compliance is required, meaning the documents must exactly match the terms of the credit. Even minor discrepancies can justify rejection, as it was established in the case of Equitable Trust Co. versus Dawson Partners Ltd. Additionally, Article 16 allows the bank to reject non-compliant documents and notify the beneficiary. Based on these principles, the bank is legally entitled to refuse payment as the discrepancies undermine the certainty required in trade finance. In conclusion, Jaya Construction Sendira Berhad cannot demand payment as the terms were not strictly complied with. Thank you. Moving on to the second issue, which deals with FOB, also known as free on board contractual obligations. The question here is whether Capital Machinery Ltd fulfilled its responsibilities under the FOB contract. The seller's key responsibilities under an FOB contract include ensuring the goods are properly cleared for export, loaded onto the buyer's nominated ship, and providing timely shipment notice. Under Article 30 of the CISG, the seller must deliver the goods and fulfill all related obligations, while Article 32 emphasizes the need for timely notification to the buyer. The case of Piring Co. Ltd versus India Steam Navigation Co. Ltd clarifies that the seller's responsibility ends once the goods are loaded on board, but failure to complete pre-shipment duties such as an export clearance constitutes a breach. In our case, if Capital Machinery Ltd did not ensure proper clearance or timely shipment, it would justify Jaya Construction's rejection of the goods. In conclusion, Jaya Construction has valid grounds to refuse acceptance and seek damages for breach of contract. That's all from me. Thank you.
Moving on to the next issue, which is whether the shipment was met on time under the Free On Board Agreement or the FOB agreement. The contract stipulated an FOB November Sydney shipment. This means that Capital Machinery Ltd had to load the goods onto the designated vessel within November 2024. They shipped the items on 20th of November. However, Jaya Construction refused to accept them, citing export clearance delays. The central question is whether the seller fulfilled their obligations or if the delay justifies Jaya Construction rejection. Under FOB Incoterms 2020, the seller's responsibility ends once the goods are loaded onto the vessel within the agreed time frame. Additionally, under the CISG, or United Nations Convention on Contracts for the International Sale of Goods, states that in Article 31 and Article 33, that the seller must deliver within the set period and take necessary actions to ensure smooth delivery. Furthermore, under the UCP 600, which governs trade finance, states that the bill of lading must confirm the shipment occurred within the agreed time frame, and banks must verify documentation within 5 banking days. If Capital Machinery Ltd met these requirements, they have fulfilled their obligations. However, if delays in export clearance were due to their failure to provide timely documentation, Jaya Construction may have a valid claim. So, Capital Machinery Ltd argues that their responsibility was limited to loading the goods onto the vessel. and external factors beyond their control caused delays. Conversely, if documentation issues from their side led to export clearance delays, they might have violated CISG requirements. So, in conclusion, while Capital Machinery Ltd appears to have met its primary FOB obligations, the resolution depends on whether the export clearance delay was their fault or due to external factors. If their actions caused by delay, Jaya Construction may have a case, otherwise, their rejection may not be justified. The fourth issue, which is whether Jaya Construction was justified in refusing to accept the goods and withholding payment, or if this constitutes a breach of contract. So, for the relevant facts that under the contract, Capital Machinery Ltd was required to submit the documents, including a clean bill of lading, a commercial invoice, full value insurance, and a conformity certificate from PISA or the Plant Inspection Service Australia. However, First Bank rejected the documents due to discrepancies, prompting Jaya Construction to withhold payment. According to UCP 600, which governs letters of credit, the principle of strict compliance applies, meaning all documents must match the contract terms exactly. So, under Article number 7, the issuing bank is only obligated to honor the credit if the documents fully comply. And while Article 16 further states that the bank must notify the seller of any discrepancies and provide an opportunity to correct them. In addition, under the CISG, or the United Nations Convention on Contracts for the International Sales of Goods, Article 53 requires the buyer to accept delivery and pay for the agreed price. However, in Article 58 clarifies that payment is not required unless the seller provides the correct documents. If discrepancies are minor and do not affect the contract fulfillment, Article 60 requires the buyer to accept the goods. So, in this case, First Bank found issues such as late submission, insufficient insurance coverage, and an incorrect inspection agency. While under UCP 600, these discrepancies provide Jaya Construction with valid grounds for rejection. However, Capital Machinery Ltd could argue that these were minor issues that did not impact the core value of the contract. And if the errors did not mislead Jaya Construction or diminish product quality, refusal could be seen as a breach of contract under CISG and under Article 60. To conclude, while UCP 600 strict compliance support Jaya Construction's refusal, if the discrepancies were minor and did not undermine the agreement's intent, their rejection might be considered a breach under the CISG. Ultimately, the resolution will depend on whether the discrepancies significantly affected the transaction and whether Jaya Construction acted in good faith.
I am Nur Shafiqah Razman. I will be discussing the legal issues arising between Capital Machinery Ltd, the seller, and Jaya Construction Sdn Berhad, which is the buyer, under their FOB contract and letter of credit agreement. Specifically, I will address two main issues: whether Capital Machinery Ltd breached the FOB terms by failing to clear the goods for export on time, and who is liable for the financial losses resulting from the rejection of the shipment and payment refusal under the letter of credit. The first issue is whether Capital Machinery Ltd's The first issue is whether Capital Machinery Ltd's alleged failure to properly clear the goods for export and the shipment timing constitute a breach of the FOB terms. Under FOB, which is Free on Board Incon terms 2020, the seller is responsible for delivering the goods on board the buyer nominated vessel, paying for export clearance and providing the required shipping documents. Once the goods are loaded, the risk and responsibility transfer to the buyer. The CISG Article 30, 32 and 33 further elaborate on these obligations. Article 30 requires the seller to deliver the goods, transfer documents and fulfill all contractual terms. Article 32 mandates timely notification to the buyer about the shipment and provision of necessary documents, while Article 33 ensures goods must be delivered within the agreed time frame. Capital Machinery Ltd delivered the goods on 20 November 2024 within the agreed month of November, complying with these provisions. However, Jaya Construction claims delays were caused by improper export clearance by Capital Machinery. FOB terms and CISG article place the obligation of export clearance solely on the seller. If Capital Machinery failed to fulfill this duty, it will constitute a breach. That said, once the goods are loaded and export clearance is complete, any delays fall under the buyer's responsibility. Since there is no constraint evidence of improper export clearance or delay caused by the seller, Capital Machinery appears to have met its obligations. The second issue concerns liability for financial losses arising from the rejection of the shipment and payment refusal under the letter of credit. The letter of credit required strict compliance with its term, including a certificate of conformity issued by a specified agency, full insurance coverage, and timely presentation of documents. UCP 600 Articles 14 and 16 enforce the principle of strict compliance, authorizing banks to reject documents that deviate from these terms. First Bank identified 3 discrepancies: an unauthorized certificate of conformity, partial insurance coverage, and late presentation of documents. This violation justified First Bank's rejection of payment. The seller, under CISG Articles 30 and 35, must ensure that documents conform to the contract and letter of credit terms. The discrepancies violated the strict compliance principle, resulting in non-payment and rejection by Jaya Construction. CISG Article 74 holds the seller liable for foreseeable losses caused by their breach. Capital Machinery should have anticipated that non-compliance with the letter of credit terms would lead to rejection and financial losses. Therefore, the seller bears primary responsibility for the financial consequences. In conclusion, Capital Machinery complied with the FOB terms regarding shipment, timing, and transfer of risk upon loading, making Jaya Construction responsible for any delays after the goods were loaded. However, the seller failed to meet the strict requirements of the letter of credit, leading to its rejection by First Bank. This failure placed Capital Machinery Ltd at fault for the financial losses incurred. Jaya Construction's refusal to accept the goods and make payments was justified under UCP 600 and CISG provisions. This case highlights the importance of strict compliance in international trade to avoid such disputes and financial losses. That is all from Group D for our International Business Law Group assignment. Thank you for your time.